and welcome to episode 65 of our weekly CRICKETher Vodcast. It's mainly going to be England focused this week, despite the fact that we're here at beautifully sunny New Road, Worcester, for Sparks against the Thunder. But yeah, we've had three quite big bits of news coming out of the England camp this week, so that's mainly what we're going to be discussing. Now, the first thing that's happened, Sid, is that we've had the announcement about the current tranche of England contracts. So there's 17 contracted players. So that's the same number as there was before, and basically what we've got is a straight swap. So Sophia Dunk has gained her first England contract, and unfortunately Kirstie Gordon has lost her England contract. So let's start off by talking about Sophia Dunk. Was that a surprise, Sid, that she's been included in the contracts list?
No, I don't think so. I mean, she toured with England over the winter, so I think that the expectation was that she's like the most promising young cricketer we've got at the moment, particularly in the batting department, of the people who haven't played in a huge number of games for England. As I pointed out last week, she hasn't yet kind of definitively stamped her mark on her international career, but she was clearly the next in line, and let's hope that this summer she can kind of play that definitive innings and go on to have a great career. And so congratulations to Sophia for getting there.
Yeah, absolutely, very well deserved. She works really hard. Obviously hasn't yet played an ODI even for England, but I think that's largely been a result of COVID and the fact that last summer, obviously England only played T20s at home. So yeah, great for her. It's a bit unfortunate for Kirstie Gordon. How disappointed do you think that she'll be, Sid, to have lost that contract?
Yeah, I've known Kirstie for a long time, and I can tell you she will be very disappointed. And she will have taken that quite hard, to be honest. And it's an interesting one really, because actually in years to come, when she looks back, even if she never plays another cricket match, she's got some fantastic achievements in her career. She's had a Player of the Match at a T20 World Cup. She's played in a World Cup final at the T20 World Cup. She's played a Test for England, and she's made some real achievements in that time. But in the short term, obviously, yes, she's going to be really disappointed. And I think that we've seen that she's come out and shown that very much, hasn't she? That she's she's kind of fired up, and she's kind of back to being the bowler she was like 2 or 3 years ago, when she kind of forced her way into that England team. It's easy to overlook the fact that the challenge that she had to overcome by coming from Scotland. She had to make that switch. She had to sign a piece of paper saying she wasn't going to play for Scotland anymore. She took a big risk, and she made that count. And things haven't gone so well for her the last year or so, but does she look back to her best now? Well, what have we seen, Raf?
Yeah, well, we saw her in the first round of RHF matches at the Ageas Bowl for Lightning against the Vipers. Very fired up indeed. We actually then interviewed Tammy Beaumont at the end of the game, and Tammy kind of said, I had to actually tap her on the shoulder and say, look, Kirstie, just calm it down a little bit. It was great. We were right up at the top of the pavilion, and we could hear her saying, come on, when she took those wickets. So yeah, really fired up, and let's hope it kind of drives her on, and she may well now go on and represent Scotland again, I suppose. Yeah,
so because she hasn't played for England for a while now, she would actually qualify for Scotland again next summer, potentially, if she wants to. The one thing that will perhaps give her cause is that if she goes on to represent Scotland again, the regulations say then that's basically it for England. It is possible to get special dispensation from the ICC to do pretty much anything you want. So the ICC reserve the right in the regulations to go, well, we can do whatever the hell we like, but essentially the regulations say that if she goes back to Scotland, she can't play for England again. So that might be something that she wants to consider. On the other hand, if she goes back to Scotland, potentially, she's got a future international career for her, helping Scotland into T20 World Cups and things.
Okay, and obviously now she drops down into the regional contract system, doesn't she? So she is now a contracted player by Lightning, so they've got 6 contracted players. Yeah,
so what's that all about, Raf? Because so Sophia Dunk, a South East Stars player, has now got a contract. So South East Stars have now gone from 5 to, now let's see, that's 4 contracts, and the Lightning have now got 6 professionals. So what's that all about, Raf?
Yeah, I mean, it's partly to do with when they introduced the domestic professional contracts, they didn't align them with the England contracts. So the domestic contracts ran from last October to this October. So what they're going to do from now is to change the England contracts so that they will next be renewed in October 2022. And then from that point on, then they will align. Of course, the England contracts run for 2 years. The domestic contracts at the moment only run for 1 year. But it will mean that you don't have this awkward situation, which we've got at the moment, whereby Lightning have suddenly got 6 professionals for the rest of the season, and the Stars have now only got 4 and might well feel slightly shortchanged. Now, this situation, as far as we're aware, will continue until October now, because that's the way that that everything's been set up. At that point, then there's a bit of a decision to be made. There's a few possible options on the table, in the sense of, and it'll be really interesting actually to see how the ECB and the regions work this out. One option, of course, is for one of the Lightning contractor players to move down to the Stars for next season, and that would kind of even up the overall number of contracts, and potentially even Kirstie Gordon herself could move to the Stars. She'd been representing Kent in the county stuff, so that's definitely an option that's on the table and would kind of keep the regional integrity of the system. The other option, of course, is that the ECB finds a bit more money from somewhere and bumps all the regions up to having 6 contracts, and at that point Storm have 7 because they've got their extra one that's being funded by Gloucestershire. But yeah, so that'll be really interesting to see what happens at that point. So things don't quite neatly align as we might hope they would at the moment, but the ECB have kind of taken action to resolve that. And of course, very important for Kirstie Gordon, isn't it, that she now has that regional contract to fall back on and isn't suddenly left, as you wrote in the piece this week, doing a Tash Farron and being unemployed sort of almost overnight. Okay, now another big bit of news this week. We have had the announcement of the England squad for the Test, and there were a few surprises in there. I'll move on to our home player Emily Arlott in a moment, but for us, one of the surprises was the non-selection of Dani Wyatt, wasn't it, Sid?
Yeah, I think that we definitely thought Dani White would be in the squad. Obviously she hasn't actually played a Test yet, and despite a long career, Raf, and we got kind of handed a stat about that, didn't we?
We did. Thank you to the Clanger, who, as always, was making very interesting comments below the line on CRICKETher. And the Clanger says Dani Wyatt is building a record that may never be broken, assuming England women continue to play Tests, that of most caps without ever playing a Test. She's played 192, or he says it might be 193, because apparently there's a bit of a statistical disagreement there, but 192 or 193 England matches without playing a Test. Her next nearest challenger is Alex Hartley, way back on 32 caps without playing a Test. So that is quite a long time to be playing for England, and a lot of appearances without playing a Test.
Yeah, and we expected her to be in the squad on the grounds that she was clearly making runs. She scored 350s in her 3 RHF innings this summer, and she is an integral part of England's white ball team. I don't think there's any doubt that she's going to be opening the batting when we get back to white ball, but they've obviously decided that she's not the right player for the red ball game.
Yeah, and it's hard to see. I mean, I say it's hard to see what more she could have done. I suppose that she could have, hit 300s in those 3 matches. But you almost do feel that Lisa Cartley and Heather Knight had made that decision before the RHF even kicked off.
Yeah, perhaps.
Okay, so that's the Dani Wyatt non-selection. Let's move on to the happier news, which was that Central Sparks seamer Emily Arlott has been called up to the England squad for the first time. Really exciting news, and great for her, and did a lovely press conference with her on Wednesday, I think it was, that they announced the squad rather. Is she going to play in the 11, Sid? That's the big question, isn't it?
That is the big question. I think she's definitely a really interesting selection. She brings something slightly different. She's got a little bit of height. She's got quite long arms, so she brings the ball down from quite high. She's quite zippy. She does seem to have put on a little bit of pace over the winter as well. And as we saw last weekend, and as the Vipers found out, a quadruple wicket maiden is not to be sniffed at.
Have you recovered from that yet?
Just about. I strongly suspect that Heather Knight and Lisa Cartley had already basically made up their mind to select her prior to that. It wasn't that got her in the squad. I don't think they're that reactive. I think they're much more considered about their selections. So she was already well on the radar, I think, and I suspect that that would just kind of put the cherry on the icing on the cake, on the plate, on all that stuff. But yeah, a very exciting player. But yeah, that's the question. What do you think, Raf? Is she going to play? Should she play? And will she play?
Yeah, I mean, they're two separate questions, aren't they? In terms of will she play, my feeling is that that's possibly unlikely. England, I keep saying this and I will keep saying it, have generally been quite conservative about their test selections. And so my feeling is that it's quite likely that they will play Catherine Brunt, Anya Shrubsole and Georgia Elwys as their three seamers, with obviously Nat Siver as support there. And that therefore she won't play, and that she's kind of been included partly as a net bowler who almost slightly mimics Jilan Goswami in terms of the ball coming from up high. So yeah, that's kind of my feeling. Should she play? Well, it's obviously a big ask to chuck somebody in at the deep end and get them, potentially opening the bowling in a test as their first international appearance. But I suppose why not? If somebody is considered good enough to be a net bowler, then why not have them actually chuck them in the 11? And as I talked about last weekend, in order to win this test, which England really should be aiming to do, you've got to bowl India out twice, and she's the strike bowler that could potentially be a bit of a secret weapon. India won't have seen much of her, and get you that goal really. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm very much of the view that given that they've selected her, they've got her in the squad now. Play her, play the weapon that could get you those crucial wickets.
Okay, and England did release a couple of players back to play in today's round of RHF matches, Freya Davies and Sarah Glenn. I think there's been quite a bit of surprise at that decision to release Sarah Glenn in particular. A lot of people were saying she was nailed on for the final Test 11, Sid.
Yeah, a lot of people did say that. I don't think the players themselves were particularly surprised. I think they had a good idea going into the selection process who was likely to be involved and who wasn't. And I think that what they're saying about Sarah Glenn is that they see her as a white ball player, and that perhaps in the longer format of the game that she just wasn't going to be the wicket-taking threat as in the same way that she will be in a situation where people are trying to push on and. So, she misses out there, but she'll almost certainly be back in the white ball team, and I expect her to be in the team, not just in the squad, for the first of the white ball games.
Yeah, and I think that what England have done right is actually allowing her to come today and play for the Sparks, rather than knowing that she's not going to be in the final 11, actually just kind of carrying the drinks for the next week and not getting that competitive opportunity for her region. Okay, final bit of news. We've done bits of news 1 and 2, bit of news 3, which was kind of wrapped in with one of the other announcements, but is actually quite significant in and of itself. Nat Siver has been appointed the vice-captain of England. She was obviously doing the job kind of subbing for Anya Shrubsole over the winter. Shrubsole was out injured. She's now been handed the role on a kind of permanent basis, if you like. What do we make of that, Sid?
Yeah, I think it's actually quite an interesting one. First of all, they've decided that they no longer want Anya Shrubsole to be the vice captain. Why would that be? Well, you want your vice captain to be someone that's an automatic selection. Does seem as if they're starting to think that Anya is no longer an automatic selection. I mean, we expect that she probably will be playing quite a lot this summer. The expectation is that she'll be in the Test lineup and she'll be in the start of the white ball lineup, but obviously not quite the automatic selection that she maybe was 2 or 3 years ago. Whereas Nat Siver, absolutely is. You're not going to leave her out of the team. Even if she had 2 broken legs and 2 broken arms, you'd be throwing her in there because she's a crucial player, not just what she brings, but the way England want to play. She's very much of that kind of forceful, take the game to the opposition. So yeah, she's kind of the player that you go, well, she's an automatic selection. But what's also interesting is kind of the way that the vice captain. What's the vice captain's role? Well, the vice captain's role is partly to obviously deputise perhaps if Heather Knight needs to leave the field. So if she's got needs a massage or she's got a very short-term injury, then that's important. She's got a secondary role to come in though if Heather Knight isn't playing a game. Over the next year or so, England are playing more games in the next year or so than they've ever played before. The rate of international cricket England are going to be playing is very large. obviously still remains quite a lot less days cricket than the men play with the tests, but I think tests are a little bit of a different thing, perhaps when you're used to playing them as well.
And we've got the same core players for all three formats,
Yes,
which obviously
exactly.
the men don't have.
Yeah, so I think there's quite a good chance that England are looking to and figuring that they'll have to rest Heather Knight at some points as well. Yeah. So Nat Siver potentially then will take over when Heather Knight is rested. But there's another thing as well now, and I think this is perhaps the most interesting side of it. Well, the third role of the vice captain can be, it's the person who is looking to become. They're looking to anoint someone as the captain in waiting, the next captain, and that's very much what they're not doing here. I think, yes, it's certainly possible that Nat Siver is 28, Heather's 30. Heather could retire in say 2 years' time, and Nat Siver could potentially have a couple of years of the captaincy. But she's not England's next long-term captain, not unless she's planning to carry on until she's 40, which in terms of athletes' careers, that she probably isn't realistically. What else is going on there? Well, there is no obvious successor at the moment. The other aspect of this is that if you were being slightly cynical, if you're the captain, what you actually don't want is someone sitting, almost in the wings going, well, if the captain has any failures, then that person is almost, putting their hand up. And we saw that with Heather Knight as the kind of successor to Charlotte Edwards, didn't we, Raf? You were remembering how it was that in the last kind of 12 months of Lottie's career?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that in that instance, Heather Knight was made vice captain, and it was obvious that she was. The expectation was that she would then become England captain. She was vice captain for 3 years, I think it was, before she became captain. But certainly for the last year or so, in the wake of that disastrous 2015 Ashes series, which England lost at home, there was a lot of stuff in the press and a lot of talk and speculation about should Charlotte Edwards be stepping down from the captaincy and allowing Heather Knight to take over. Now, we were quite sceptical about that. We felt that actually Charlotte Edwards still had a lot to give in terms of leadership, and also that perhaps Heather Knight wasn't quite ready for the captaincy. But when she did take over, I think she proved us wrong, really. She had to do it quite suddenly, in quite a surprising, difficult situation, and she certainly proved a very safe pair of hands. I think in her first match as captain, she scored a half century and took a fifer, so there you go, and that was great. So we were a little bit wrong about that, but yes, certainly for Charlotte Edwards, it was quite a difficult period because people were starting to question her leadership. So I guess what you're saying is that to some extent, England are trying to avoid that happening again.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue it's a tad cynical, but if you were in Heather Knight's position and you were thinking about it politically, what you don't want to do is anoint a successor that's sitting there ready to take over should you ever slip up. So, tad cynical, you decide.
Anyway, thanks for tuning in as ever, and we're going to go and watch a bit more cricket now and enjoy the sunshine. See you next week.
Bye.